Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for the third and final session in our CES track, Future Shock, the Tech and Trends Changing Entertainment. I am pleased to present to you the moderator of our next panel on the Metaverse. Duncan Crabtree-Ireland is the National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator for SAG-AFTRA, in which role he leads and oversees our negotiations on every contract, most pertinently with the major studios and networks on the entertainment contracts for movies, television, digital, etc. Also on our music contracts with the recording industry and across the commercials and digital landscape. Duncan has also been the driving force behind the union's focus on technology over the last decade and is one of the singular reasons that SAG-AFTRA was named to Fast Company's World's Most Innovative Companies list last year, number 7 in the entertainment industry, the first union ever to appear on that list. And with that, I give you Duncan Crabtree-Ireland.
Thanks so much, Pam, and thanks everybody for being here. Really excited about this next panel, and we have some amazing panelists. The metaverse, I think, as we all know, is changing how people consume entertainment, and there's a real question about what role actors and influencers will play in this new medium. So I want to say, so we're all asking ourselves, what exactly is the metaverse? Of course, that's a great question. I can say from being here at CES last year, there's a lot of different answers to that question. Some people view it very differently. But one thing we can all agree on is the metaverse is evolving as we speak. And it's indisputable that the metaverse has the potential to revolutionize how we communicate with each other and how we interact with our entertainment in the digital realm that promises to blur the line between reality and virtual reality. So this new world holds tremendous opportunities for the entertainment industry, but what about creative artists, especially actors, entertainers, and influencers? Is there a place for them in the metaverse? If so, what will it look like? The truth is, nobody is exactly sure about that, but there are experts and visionaries on this very subject who have a pretty clear idea of what's in store for artists and entertainers as they enter the metaverse, and we've enlisted some of them for our panel today to help us better understand and talk about this exciting new world and the critical role actors and influencers are going to play in it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and if they'd come up and take their seats as I introduce them. First of all, Solo Ceesay is the CEO and co-founder of Calaxy, an open social marketplace designed and built by creators for creators. Yep. Solo's success in raising over $33.5 million in private funding for Calaxy has everyone in the entertainment industry buzzing, with Variety naming him one of Hollywood's new leaders of 2022. So welcome, Solo. Next is Charles Okochu. Charles is Senior Business Development Manager at a small company you might have heard of called Amazon. Amazon managed blockchain at Amazon Web Services. Please welcome Charles. His experience and passion for technology and financial services, blockchain, and digital assets are helping to pave the way toward a more secure online experience. Next, we have SAG-AFTRA's own Shaine Griffin, who is a longtime labor and community organizer and is SAG-AFTRA's manager of contract strategic initiatives. She's an instrumental component, yes, of overall commercial and influencer talent strategy for the union and has focused on the intersection of influencers and advertisers, specializing in how both are navigating new and emerging platforms. She was also instrumental in the development of our landmark influencer agreement. And finally, Wong. Please welcome Wong, who is Director of Live Entertainment at Unity. She is an accomplished inventor. She is a patent holder. She's an author and a speaker, and her contributions to the film industry are numerous. Most notable is the creation of the real-time AR reflection lighting production tool Mill Cyclops, which she helped invent at the real-time and interactive business she co-founded, Mill Experience. So welcome to all of you. So glad to be here with you. And I'm going to start it off with a question, and then I'm going to join you in a second while we're answering that. So let's just start off on a very light note that I hinted at in the intro. What is the metaverse anyway? I know it's hard to define in the general lexicon. It's hard to nail down, but I think maybe we can ask each of our panelists to dig in a little bit into that question. So, Boo, why don't we start with you on that?
Hello, hello. There we go. I was hoping that all the way down in this end of the line, it wouldn't be the first person to answer this question, but I think we all have about 3 hours right now to talk about what the metaverse is. So great. But I think in a summary, I think we're all developing this right now. It is an evolving space. It's not set. If anybody says the metaverse is dead, they don't realize it's not really born yet. It's being created. So I think we're, as kind of pioneers in this space, we're developing it. So in many ways, we're helping to define it. I think that the most common way people think about it is that it's a kind of an interactive 3D social space that also will have utility, will have entertainment, will have games, and that it is a space that is contextually and spatially aware as well. So right now we think about it as perhaps it's VR only, you're only in a headset, and now you're in the metaverse. Welcome, Ready Player One. But I think that it's really going to launch once AR really kicks in. And then we're really going to be able to have these digital layers in our life that is pervasive.
Shaine, do you want to comment on what the metaverse is from the union perspective?
Yes, I will try.
That sounds great.
Well, I definitely agree with everything Boo said. But I would add also that my understanding of the metaverse is right now a collection of virtual spaces that are very immersive and experiential, that integrate some component of artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, but at its core are meant to bring people together, bring community together, and build connectivity. And so, as it pertains to SAG-AFTRA, we're going to see a lot of ways that the metaverse engages people, entertainment, but also work, and just fostering that sense of camaraderie among humans that might not be able to sit next to each other. So.
Awesome. Charles, I think you have a perspective on this issue too.
Yes. So from our perspective at AWS, we look at the metaverse as a combination of virtual reality, mixed reality or augmented reality, which can be accessible through either a phone or a virtual reality headset, and allows people to interact with each other or share experiences with each other over distance, using the internet. And from our perspective, the metaverse, it can be broken up into 7 layers. So there's 7 layers that make up the metaverse. The first layer is the infrastructure layer, which is where AWS plays. We're one of the largest cloud service providers, so people run a lot of their metaverse applications on our compute platforms. And on top of that layer is what you would call the human interface layer, which is the virtual reality headsets that you see. And that's kind of, for most people, when you talk about metaverse, that's the first thing they think about, virtual reality. And then above that layer is the decentralization layer, which is what you call the ownership layer. That's the layer that you have, your ownership of the assets or objects that are being created in the metaverse. And most of the time, at least more recently, it's built on top of blockchains, which allow you to, create tokenization of physical and virtual assets in that space, and allows you to claim ownership or prove that you own those specific assets in the metaverse. Then after that, after the decentralization layer, you also have what I call the spatial computing layer, which is the layer that allows you to validate where you are within that virtual world. So you also can include things like geospatial mapping, like GPS. And so when you're interacting or moving inside of the metaverse, you have a sense of where you are. And then on top of that, the next layer, we're almost there. We're 7 layers, so I'm at the 4th layer now. So just bear with me, okay? Just want to make sure everybody has a good understanding of, and then so on top of that layer is what you would call the creator economy layer. So that's kind of where you have, because you have to allow people to be able to create tools. You have tools to create objects or create experiences on top of, the platform that's been built so far. So in the Web 2 world, you had, web frameworks like, JavaScript frameworks, and so tools are being built on top of that to allow you, who's interacting, to build your own experiences. And then on top of that layer, we have what's the name of that layer again? The discovery layer. So within the discovery layer, you're talking about things like search, ad networks. Those, because in the Web 2 world, the world we live in right now, you have search engines like Google. But in the metaverse, you need to be able to discover where to find games. You need some sort of directory to figure out where to find, virtual reality movies or games or esports. So having that discovery layer, one for searching for information, and then also to inform you, almost like a marketing, when new experiences or new platforms are being built. And then on top of that, the final layer is the experience layer. So you can decide exactly what you want to watch, whether you want to watch a 3D or virtual reality movie like Avatar, which you just saw recently, or you want to engage in esports and engage with the rest of the metaverse. So that kind of makes up, that's the entire how we define metaverse. And that was longer than 2 minutes, but I hope it helps.
No, I mean, I think that 7-layer burrito explanation is definitely, it's good. It's a good one for Solo. Do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think I now know what the metaverse is.
Well, that puts you ahead of about 50% of the people in the exhibit hall, so that's good.
But yeah, no, I think the most important thing, that was just said right now is the idea of how important Web3 technologies are in making the metaverse something that can scale practically and something that can be usable, right? Like when you think about the traditional internet and being able to just interact and like the idea of version 1 of the internet was read, and version 2 is interact with, and the third is ownership. I think the idea of blockchain technologies makes this a lot more practical and allows these technologies to scale. And so I think the biggest misconception that everyone here is, and I appreciate everyone for coming because obviously, Web3 is pretty synonymous with the metaverse and it probably shouldn't be. But obviously it's been a crazy time in our space. So you brave souls who've decided to come out and learn more about this stuff is super important. But lastly, I think it's important to note that the metaverse is something that has been around for a long period of time, and the basis between the value we put on things in the physical world and the digital world has continued to compress for many, many decades. And blockchain technologies evolved as that next sort of step to compressing that even tighter, but making these technologies more real and more usable in our everyday lives.
And how does that relate to what Calaxy is doing? I mean, it's been described as an open social marketplace by and for creators. And it seems like it approaches the metaverse as a creative space. How does that, how does that fit into the broader advent of the metaverse and the sort of the reshaping of the metaverse and the sharing of ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the world doesn't get to a decentralized world or like a metaverse world in a day. I think it's something that's going to be a long process. And so us as a company long term, we very much so resonate with those ideals and those core principles that made blockchain such an important technology within our generation. Calaxy specifically wants to be a sandbox for where a content creator, famous influencer of some type, or anybody with an audience is able to better connect with their fans and start to extract value from their own ecosystem in the form of monetization. We've seen the rise of applications like Cameo, Patreon, other these creator-centric platforms. And the reason why they've been able to do so well is that there's a huge ownership problem within the traditional internet. And so Calaxy is like a Web3, that next step in iteration and allowing people to take ownership of their things and have, verifiable identities and ways to assign ownership to certain things and being able to, collaborate in a way that keeps everything very public and transparent. And so we hope to, walk those lines immediately. We're more of like a Web 2.5 project, which feels more and looks like a Web 2 application. But underneath the hood, we're going to continue to unveil the curtains and, explore those great opportunities within the metaverse and things like that. But to start, it's going to be a lot more like those applications that live in the Web 2 space.
That's really interesting. In an earlier panel today on AI, we were talking about the importance of being able to authenticate and sort of confirm, the origins of content as AI becomes more and more powerful, and therefore the source of things becomes questionable. So that's fascinating. Boo, could I turn to you and ask you in what ways you see the metaverse sort of changing how we experience entertainment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the first thing and most obvious thing that it brings is are those new platforms. These are new places that you can go to experience content, whether it's linear, films or interactive game. These are new platforms that you can go to. It's not just sitting in a movie theater or going to your living room to turn on the television, or even flipping open the laptop or sitting on with your iPad. This is actually bringing different types of platforms. So that the format itself is changing. Also, I think that it's adding interactivity to it as well. You're no longer a passive viewer. You could be, sure. But in I think the kind of deeper experiences that we're going to be seeing going forward, these are interactive, lean forward experiences for audiences. Is going to change the way you interact with content. If you ask, a lot of the younger generation or whatever, they're interactively dealing with content as is, and they're leaning towards those types of formats as is. This is not to say this is not substitutional. It's not like linear content is going to go away anytime soon, but this is adding another layer to it. And then the other thing is that it is a kind of a pervasive or a persistent, actually, that's probably a better word, a persistent experience. It doesn't necessarily have to turn off. It's not like a show that is on for 40 minutes or 33 minutes or a 2-hour format. This is, once you get onto these platforms, it is 24/7. You can just log in, it's on demand, it's there all the time. So I think that just the format itself is really going to change things. One other thing I wanted to as I was sitting there listening to you all talk, we did a virtual concert recently with Blue the Tiger. And the thing that was super unique about it was that we actually, it was a virtual concert. So we volumetrically captured her and her band. And then we streamed that, simulcast that to 2 different metaverse or interactive platforms. Now, the thing that's interesting to think about that is that a lot of times when you see virtual shows, you can only see it on, say, Roblox or Sandbox or Fortnite or one particular venue. In this case, we basically had a concert and we streamed it to FutureFest and to Vroom on VRChat. So we actually had a concert that went to 2 different virtual venues. Now think about it. In the real world, could you get Blue to perform at the Ace Hotel in LA, and then also simultaneously, in New York in a theater? She couldn't be in both places at the same time. But in this case, once you basically go to this format, you actually have that interoperable content. You have that open format where you could, if you wanted to, and actually more importantly, if the artist wants to, they can meet audiences not just in one venue, whether it's physical or virtual, but they can go to as many venues as they want. And so that's something that we always hear a lot about interoperable content, open metaverse, and we wanted to not just talk about it, we actually wanted to do it. So we actually made that happen in, I think, November. So that was a really cool thing for Blue.
And speaking about the open metaverse, one of the things we talked about when we had a prep conversation for this that we should make clear is, even though there's a company that's appropriated that beginning of that name, the metaverse is not a proprietary place, but to the contrary, it's the opposite of that, right? Anyone want to comment on that point?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like the rebrand from Facebook to Meta was quite, presumptuous, I think, a little bit in certain ways,
Bold.
but at the same time, it was bold. But I think the idea was really good though, because like anybody that's a deep person in the space, like, everyone thinks as a, Web3 person, you don't really like big, large enterprises, but I'm actually on the other side of the coin. I think them doing that was very big signaling on like where the world is going. And so I think that was, good within itself. But to what had been stated here before, like the power of the metaverse is really like it creates practicality, and it's the power of blockchain in the metaverse is what makes this stuff useful, practical. It's the only way for this stuff to exist.
Shaine, I wanted to ask you what you think about the role of influencers in the metaverse. Does the metaverse change what it means to be an influencer? How are you looking at that?
It's a great question, and I think there's a few ways we can tackle it, because are we talking about virtual influencers who are digital representations of people and are amassing followers that way? Or are we talking about influencers in the traditional sense whose subject matter expertise is the metaverse? Or are we talking about influencers, again, as we traditionally know and love them, who are now engaging inside of the metaverse? So I think as the metaverse continues to evolve, because it's still very nascent, our conceptualization of influencers will change as well. But that said, SAG-AFTRA really believes that influencers, actors, any entertainers who are pioneers in this space really are best served when we are there to help support, guide, and protect them, because it is very much still the wild, wild west.
Well, it's funny that you say that. The Wild Wild West, we were talking in an earlier panel about implications for rights and copyright, but not only copyright, also rights of publicity, other related rights. Charles, I wanted to ask what you think about how the metaverse is going to, what impact it's going to have on copyright and what impact copyright's going to have on it and other rights that are crucial for creators in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, as Ceesay's mentioned several times, using the power of decentralization and blockchains allows you to create, NFTs, which are not the typical NFTs that you guys are used to, but you can tokenize any type of asset. It could be real estate. It could also be the digital likeness of an actor or an influencer or a movie star. And so we're working with companies in the space to, like there's a company called HG Registry IO they're working with right now, who's digitizing the likeness of movie stars or even football players, or and basically they're using volumetric 3D video and audio to record every move or every motion and capture that motion and store it as an NFT in the blockchain. So you mentioned about the fact that you can actually be in more than one place, and that what they're using that solution for is to allow an artist or an influencer to direct or acting a movie and maybe attend a keynote at a conference like this, and also mint NFTs and do anything they want to do all at the same time, just using the digital likeness that's been recorded and allowing them to be in more than one place at one time. Even long after they're gone, they can still, their beneficiaries or their who will inherit those rights will continue to be able to monetize those assets on an ongoing basis. So it's a very, very powerful platform. And that's kind of where copyrights kind of comes into play, because you also have to ensure that the underlying asset itself, you don't just assume that because you mint an NFT for the asset, you're already taking care of your copyright. You also have to ensure that from the legal perspective, that you have ownership of the underlying assets itself. So that's kind of how we see it at AWS.
It's funny how you're I think making the point to distinguish the concept of NFTs generally from sort of what people think of as NFTs. And I remember vividly back in this area in 2019 here at CES, 2018 and 2019, everyone was talking about NFTs. NFTs were going to change the world. They were going to change the entertainment industry, et cetera. That seems, I'm not saying NFTs have no role in the industry, but I think we could say that the predictions that within a year or two, everything was going to be all about NFTs the sort of entertainment focused NFTs. We could say that didn't pan out exactly that way.
We're in the valley of despair right now in the innovation cycle, and no thanks to a 29-year-old billionaire.
Well, there's that.
So,
and some
but
others too.
I think we'll get there. I mean, we're at this point, we support builders. We even though the markets are down, and a few of you probably invested in NFTs, So, but don't worry, things will come back. I think things.
They
will
always
get
say
better.
that.
What I can say is this: I talk to different companies, builders across the globe, and when you look at the number of smart contracts that are being developed and the number of ideas that I hear on a daily basis, and this we're not talking about just virtual assets. We're talking about physical assets like copyrights or even real estate or any type of asset that you can think of right now that requires contracts. They're all being digitized. Very vital records like birth certificates are being digitized. California just recently announced, put in a executive order saying that all birth certificates and other vital records have to be on a blockchain. So it's happening. It's just taking a little bit of time to get there.
Right. I mean, to me, I think one of the key points there is to make sure people aren't just thinking about the various clubs and other sort of forms of NFTs that have been sort of popularized in the media, but actually, like you said, smart contracts and other utilities that are attached to NFTs and those more fundamental uses of NFTs being the building blocks of the metaverse and also the ability to authenticate content and to verify the source of things in the future. I mean, I think there's a lot of functionality there that's beyond how people are thinking about NFTs just as a asset to be traded.
Yes.
In the world. So.
Yeah, you can also, I mean, for instance, with what you guys do at SAG-AFTRA, looking after actors, and you can actually use it to keep track of any time a piece of content is played back, so to ensure that the actors that are involved in the movie or the production get paid their royalties. So that's another area where NFTs are being used to ensure that they get paid royalties in any region. Let's say you convert them, Friends movie or Friends TV show and play it back in, say, a different country. You want to ensure that anytime that piece of content is played back, that those actors are actually paid. So it's one use case that we're seeing right now, for instance.
Well, we're here at the CES and SAG-AFTRA's Future Shock, panel track, which means we don't shy away from the tough questions. And so you all know I'm about to ask this question. But I think it's something probably on everyone's mind, which is where should we go and where are we going to go in terms of regulation and sort of rule setting for the metaverse? Because surely we've learned some lessons from our experience in the past about what happens with a true Wild West situation. So I'm going to ask each panelist to comment on this. And even though I started with you last time, but I'm going to start with you again this time because it's been a second since you were talking. So could you share what your thoughts are about what's the proper role for organizations like SAG-AFTRA, for organizations like the government in setting boundaries and setting sort of parameters about how content is used, how creators are protected in the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very big question. I think you would probably actually be better positioned to answer this, but I think that from a platform builder point of view, from a content also builder point of view, we want to make sure that we are respectful of the talent that are making these things, whether it's technology or if it's a creative. And so how do we even support that in the right way in this kind of new environment? I mean, we're seeing things right now, when you look at, image generation, like with through AI with Midjourney, or yeah, it's really, it's amazing. It's incredible what is going to be possible, but the how we manage it is really still up in the air. I do think that it is important to figure out how to support the artists, but also not dampen the creativity that's possible through these, AI tools and other, kind of metaverse platforms that will spring up as well. So it's really a fine line that we're going to walk. I don't have an easy answer for that. I think that there will need to be some guidelines to protect creators and talent. But I also think that we need to be able to enable, some open development, because otherwise we're not going to evolve the space at all.
Shaine, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, Boo, and I would just add that with the digitalization of performers, right, it's going to have incredible implications, both in opportunity, but also how folks are potentially exploited and compensated. And so while we would love for every actor, no pun intended, to be a good player in this space and treat our talent fairly and equitably, we also know that there have to be rules to the road, right? And there has to be some kind of engagement with folks like SAG-AFTRA who are there to advocate on behalf of performers who really just want to do their craft and do what they love. And so we are there to support, advocate, guide, and grow with the industry. We want to collaborate with producers so that everyone wins and you can make amazing content, but our performers are also safe and protected in this space.
And think about like the near future when we actually will have to deal with, AI generated talent and who may have an opinion about what their rights are and how they want to be represented and protected as well. So,
We're already there, actually. I mean, if you talked about, DALL-E 2, they're generating art. And then when you couple that with ChatGPT, which is kind of the new craze that can actually act as a chatbot and respond, you already have companies already building corporate influencers already that actually respond to customers within the metaverse. And
Yeah,
so-
or writing pitch decks for
or
you.
pitch decks, exactly, or college acceptance resumes and things like that. So, but as far as on the question of regulation, from my perspective, I mean, I think back to the 90s during the Clinton administration. I'm sure you guys, some of you here, are old enough to remember the V chip and what a disaster that was. And as you know, we don't want that in this new age with the metaverse. I think that, you know, when you leave politicians and lawmakers who don't understand the technology to begin with, and that's why there's actually no regulation in cryptocurrency markets and Web3 currently in general, because they don't know what to do. They don't understand the technology well enough to actually construct regulation. That's my personal belief. So I think the industry, you know, and that's where it should take leadership in actually helping to draft standards that are acceptable across. And that's where SAG-AFTRA can actually help set the standards and at least put forward those standards to kind of, you know, keep actors safe and ensure that their digital likeness is not used in contents that they did not approve of, like, you know, pornography or things like that. Because it's possible once they have access to your content, it can be used in ways that you don't expect. So that's my own personal view as far as regulation and policy.
So
I would say, yeah, I've been a little bit quiet, but I have some thoughts. So I think when you think about the core ethos of blockchain technologies and like what you might hear, all the FUD that you read about or hear about on the internet about how cryptocurrencies or decentralized technologies are all Ponzi schemes, they don't have a value. It's because we, especially in the developed world, don't see the benefits of truly decentralized technologies and how much more trust you can have in technologies if they aren't able to be manipulated by one person or one party, right? And so I think when you think about the government doing exactly that, which is one setting the standards about some things that they may not, one, know enough about, or also have incentives to try and manipulate a certain way for their own personal gain, I think that's where I would be an advocate for there to be more so entities and parties like SAG-AFTRA or like shepherds, if you will, of people from the community to mobilize the entire group of people and have it be reflective of truly what we want it to be, right? Like that's the whole, and that's like the kumbaya vision of like what blockchain technologies are, what Web3 is, but reality, it's our one chance to help have a say in defining the rules and standards that affect us the most, which I think we should be a lot more active about versus waiting for the government to come in and try and regulate us.
Yeah, I would also add that I'm hoping that the Screen Actors Guild will also work with other guilds in other countries as well, and maybe form a, you know, like a decentralized autonomous organization made up of, you know, guilds across the world, especially in third world countries like in India, Africa. You know, to help set those standards, to ensure that their rights are not violated as well in terms of.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, and I'll take the opportunity to plug the International Federation of Actors, which is exactly the type of organization you're talking about, that has representatives from the actors unions in India and in several countries.
I did not know
as
that.
well. So,
I learned something new today. That's great.
but you know, and I think the points you've made are excellent. And I guess what I would just add is what history has taught us is this industry needs to work together. And when I say this industry, I don't mean only the entertainment industry. I mean the technology industry. Everyone who's got an interest in the metaverse needs to work together to come up with an agreed framework for protection of people's rights, their image and likeness, copyright, content, etc. Because if we don't, that's when things happen that people don't like government, you know, extreme behaviors occurring that cause governments to feel like they have to get involved. And perhaps people who may not have as much of a nuanced perspective on how all of this works start making mandatory rules and things like that. So hopefully we can all work together to help avoid that. I think we've moved into the point where it's time to take some questions from the audience, do some question and answer. So excited to hear what people in the audience might want to ask or comment on. And so I think I'm just looking for hands, and I think there's a mic out there somewhere which we'll go to. The first hand I see is this woman right up here in the third row center. It looks like Pam's got one right behind you. On the other aisle, though. There we go. Thank you, Gabrielle.
By the way, no questions
By the
around.
way,
no Bitcoin or Ethereum questions, please. I don't know the price.
And by the way,
No
let me just say,
speculation.
our microphone, the person who is handing you the microphone happens to be the president of the International Federation of Actors, Gabrielle Carteras. So I just think that's marvelous. So
Thank you. My question is actually for Charles. The first part of the question is, how do I know you're really here and not in room 8? And this is not a digital version. But with that in mind, honestly, the ethics for me as a consumer of entertainment, I would be concerned that, for example, if I paid $300 to watch Bruno Mars in concert, and I found out that Bruno Mars was actually in New York in concert in real, and I was paying to watch a digital version of him. Although I may have thoroughly enjoyed it, I wouldn't have wanted to pay more than maybe $25 for that. And so what is the ethics and how will that be handled in terms of making sure the consumers are aware of what's real and what is digital and what our rights are related to that?
Okay. To answer the first question, sometimes I'm not even sure I'm here. It's been a long day. But I guess you raise a very important ethical question around, you as a consumer, you as a customer, you want the real thing. You want to have the real person. You want to feel, Bruno Mars on the stage sweating and have drops of sweat drop on you while you're watching. I like that too, by the way. So I think the point is it could democratize it to ensure that you maybe don't necessarily have to pay the whole thing. So just like when you go to watch Bruno Mars, he's in residence right now. So when you have seats up at the front, you pay extra for those seats, right? And then as you go further back into the bleachers, you pay less and less. So maybe what would happen is, the pricing mechanism would be such that if you're watching a digital likeness of him, it's probably going to be much cheaper. But you could pay for virtual front row seats that are maybe less expensive than being there in person. I think that's, the market will dictate that. But I hope that answers your question.
it's a fascinating question. Actually, in the previous panel, we talked about ABBA Voyage, which some of you may be familiar with, which is an entirely holographic in-person concert in London of ABBA. For those who are too young to know who that is, I can't help you. But the bottom line, but the bottom line is, there's I mean, people go and they spend concert ticket prices to go to a virtual concert with holographic ABBA and real life other performers, I should say. And so, and people seem very happy to do that. So I think as long as it's fully disclosed, I mean, if they were running that show and not telling you it wasn't actually going to be ABBA there, and you thought that, and then you showed up and there were holograms, then you'd probably be upset. But if you know what you're getting into from the beginning, then you probably it's all a matter of consent and acceptance.
And I do want to state something very important. In about 50 years, that method of interacting or watching concerts will be the dominant form. So it's very important to keep that in mind. And imagine if long after he's gone, if he's no longer here, you could still watch a concert of him, maybe with songs that he never released before he died. So I'm also hoping that at some point we figure out how to get off this planet and go to the moon or other places. You will be watching content on the moon via virtual reality, not in person. And that will be the bulk of the human race watches content. So just keep that in mind.
And I think if I can add one thing to that real quick, which is that, even today, this virtual performances are not substitutional for the real thing, as long as we disclose properly, of course. But, when you think about how many of us are lucky enough to be in the catchment area where we can actually go see a live show, we may be within a 30-minute, drive or train ride, or even 2 hours of a special show. I'm going to go drive into the city and do that. There are billions of people who will never be in a catchment area to see a play or a comedian or a musical or any concert. They will never be near that. But think about how this can be brought to them and not just as a video performance, but something they can actually feel like they're part of, they can interact with and have some impact on the performer, and maybe even give feedback to the performer in real time. Like, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to democratize the live entertainment experience and open up to more audiences who may never be fortunate enough to be within a catchment area geographically or financially.
But if I can add one quick thing, I think that, again, this is a question of automation versus augmentation too. And while there will be a prevalence of this digital experience, real life connectivity, I don't think will ever go away completely. And the thing that pops into my mind is VidCon. Has anyone been to VidCon? It's yes, Ben White here. People flock from all over the world to meet their favorite influencers, and the energy and excitement in those rooms you can't get from scrolling through your feed and interacting by pressing a like button. So yes, I think the metaverse will create more interactivity, but that sitting next to you is awesome. I think that's not going to go away.
On that note, I think we might have another question out in the audience. I know I saw another hand or two. Feel free to raise them again. Okay, I see gentleman over there in the back, and then this lady here in the front.
Also, I was going to say, if you want that feeling of Bruno Mars's sweat, we'll be able to probably put that into the...
There's a technology for that. It's actually coming out soon.
Thank you very much. Good question. What do you think the trajectory of metaverse evolution will be? It will be a community, or it will be a place where human beings are interacting with each other in a VR format, or it would rather be community of NPCs powered by AI, communicating and interacting with each other, also based on a human-generated content. It's NPC world or human world in a VR format? What's your vision?
I mean, I would say from my perspective, that's a very hard question to kind of pinpoint. I would say the short answer is it's hard to say. But I think when you think about the different applications of what the metaverse might mean for different aspects of our lives, one analogy I like to listen to a lot, or one I like to throw out a lot, is the idea of like how your followers end up turning into your neighbors, right? So like when you think about the current internet, you have all the people you interact with, but the metaverse would be that you could do more things with them that you would do in regular life with them. So it's like opening a whole new world of collaboration and opportunities that didn't exist. And I think the most important thing that people didn't directly say, but they all hinted at, was the idea of how this creates infinitely more avenues for inclusion that don't exist today. So like the idea of like not living close enough to the New York metropolitan area to go to, to
Whatever
go
you
to,
want.
Yeah, to get whatever you want, quite honestly, or to be able to go to these large events is something that's like super important. And so I think moving forward, it's like that different applications of that. So what your work life looks like, Slack right now, you interact with your people, but what if you were able to do more interactive in like the way you could ideate and collaborate is probably just going to extend a lot more. And so like the 3, 5, 10, 20, 50, apparently 50 years, it's going to be everything. But it could be a lot of different things depending on what you're talking about.
Great, thanks, Solo. Next question was right up here in the front.
Okay, this is like, I've been to a few panels, and this is the first one that's having a Q&A. And in these sessions, I am an actor and a filmmaker. And I also am a spiritual healer. I started a business as a life coach. And I'm here because I'm listening to everything, and I know it's about tech and the future of things. And I'm so curious to the consideration of mental health and where that is put in place with the thoughts of our future, because so many people are suffering right now, especially with the new trends of technology. And I just don't feel that that is really being addressed, because listening to everybody speak, I'm also thinking about all the people in my own personal life that I know that are suffering a lot with so many different things, from the children to adults, and then also just seeing, I'm sorry to bring the conversation so down, but this is a concern of mine, of where our world is headed with, and I'm just hearing all these great things, but with this digital world and sensitive people like myself, like I wish I could be like an influencer, but I'm so sensitive to it. And I'm just like, this world is like feeling like it's just not addressing that aspect of people who are, there's lots of sensitive people, but and things are happening. Lots of influencers have taken their lives, and that stuff isn't being talked about. So if any one of you guys could just talk about your thoughts on how even be like the regulations and considering mental health and where things are headed.
Yeah, I would say that that's a great question. I think there's multiple avenues for that. So I appreciate you bringing that up because no one ever does talk about this. But me specifically being a builder for creators and influencers trying to reinstill equity into their system, I'd say one thing is that, a free market is a lot better in the sense that it allows people to extract the value they create. And so I think one of the biggest friction points that we see is that content creators don't get rewarded adequately for what they contribute or what they create. And so I think one of the biggest strains that I see just dealing with a lot of people within the entertainment industry comes from burnout. And why do people get burned out? Well, they have to continue working because they're getting paid pennies on the dollar for what their content's truly worth. And so I think the most important thing is like with the booming of NFTs, for instance, right? And we talked about royalties so since ERC 721 or that token standard, being able to attach royalties to someone's work so they can be compensated over time, especially when you think about an artist early in their career. Their work is probably not going to be priced as much as it is, 20 years from now, but they don't capture any of that upside when that art is worth 20x what it was when they created it. And so I think creating the technologies to properly associate or distribute value within the ecosystem is something that will help alleviate that a little bit. It's not going to completely get rid of it because as we have an emphasis on shifting towards a digital world, we're spending more time on our phones, spending more time, in this world. There are definitely going to be strains for that. But within the metaverse, there, should hopefully, be different, avenues for mental health awareness and things like that and those services. But then also, companies and unions like SAG-AFTRA to like help, shepherd creators through that will be super important and impactful.
I think isolation is, I think burnout is a huge part of it, like Solo said, and obviously creators being compensated fairly is a huge part of that. There's also the risk of isolation. And I think one of the things we all recognize is that how you perceive, if you take influencers as an example, how you perceive their lives and how their lives may actually be are different because just like any content creator, there is content creation going on there that is not necessarily reflecting the full reality of somebody's life. And I think that can contribute to isolation. But I was going to ask Shaine if she might comment. I think that one of the roles that SAG-AFTRA plays is creating a community of influencers and a place where people who understand what that experience is like can connect with each other and help alleviate some of that isolation, as well as other resources in the industry. But I don't know, Shaine, if you agree with that or if you have a different take on it.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to speak about that because, I think that is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. I have a master's in social work, so I love it. But one of the most exciting things about the influencer agreement, the SAG-AFTRA influencer agreement, as well as all of our contracts, is it gives creatives an opportunity to qualify for health insurance so that they can access mental health resources as well, which when we were speaking to the influencer community in particular was a huge motivation for joining our community of professional performers because they are churning out content, they are in the public eye, they are getting feedback, not always very positive, and that wears on them. So to give them an outlet and a community in which they can find support and services has been one of the most incredible things.
Great, thanks.
If I might add to that, I think, again, over the last 3 years, we've been through COVID, and that's how actually increased the isolation that a lot of people felt. It led to people losing their loved ones, and it also broke a lot of social bonds over the last 2-3 years. And I think we're all going through that. The one thing that I would say, based on working with healthcare providers, companies in the spaces, it allowed the government to ensure that you can get telehealth services now. Before it wasn't covered by your healthcare insurance, but telehealth is now something that's available, and it's still nascent, in the sense that it's still using like a Zoom. But I'm assuming that this is where the metaverse can help. Then you can actually get access to telehealth services over the metaverse, talking to actual doctors. So that could be a way to help alleviate that. So as well, I hope that answers your question.
Well, that's what we're
can't
going to do. We
solve-
specialize in start, because if you don't start, you'll never get there, right? Do we have time for one more question or no? I'm just looking at the. Okay, it has to be a very quick one. So only raise your hand if it's a quick question. Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone over there. I'm not seeing hands. So this gentleman right here in the very nice coat. There we go.
Thank you. This is a quick question. So if you're using a technology like volumetric video capture to capture an individual, I see a direct line in how you can protect the actor going forward, right? What happens in the instance where there's a digital replication of the talent that's being created in an animation studio that looks close enough to the talent, but not directly being leveraged? Like, where do you see that going?
Okay, so I'm going to get a little technical, if you don't mind, but I'm going to try and do it as quickly as possible. So for some of the companies that we work with on volumetric video capture, where we capture it and store the information, in AWS, we also store what we call the hash of the video. Think of it as a digital footprint, a digital fingerprint of the video. And if you attempt to change any portion of the video, edit it, change it, the hash changes almost immediately. So as long as you're storing the hash on the blockchain, which is immutable and cryptographically verifiable, you store the hash and the URL link where the video is stored on the blockchain. Anytime, and you validate that you authenticate that this is the original and version of that piece of content that got captured. Anytime someone else manually modifies the content, or you use AI tools like DALL-E 2 to change the content so that it looks somewhat like the same person, but maybe they have a mole or something else, you can easily validate and authenticate against a hash, ensure that piece of content has actually been modified. So there is technology to help you solve that problem.
And I think there's a sort of a broader picture question that's sort of embodied as well, which is it okay for somebody to do a volumetric capture or to do a scan of a performer and then just keep that data on file for future use? And from the union's point of view, the contractual question there is when companies who are doing that pursuant to a SAG-AFTRA collective bargaining agreement, when they're doing that, there's a very clear limitation on what the permissible use of that scan is and the conditions under which that needs to be maintained. So that obviously doesn't protect people when they work outside of the scope of a union contract, or if they agree to be scanned or to do volumetric capture, in a non-union space. But for SAG-AFTRA members working under SAG-AFTRA contracts, that has been an area we've been focused on for a number of years. I want to really just say thank you so much to this amazing panel: Boo Wong, Shaine, Griffin, Charles Okochu, Solo Ceesay. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone for being here. We'll see you next year.